I think there's a lot of history in this house and the studio here, and that's what he was all about, and that's just kind of what each of us want to do, and kind of makes things that people hopefully enjoy but also can benefit their lives.
For 15 years, Hollywood observed an unwritten, invisible rule. Do not expect Blanket Jackson to speak. While his older siblings, Prince and Paris, chose to step into the blinding neon glare of the spotlight to confront their father's titanic legacy, the youngest child took a different path. Blanket, the infant, famously dangled over a fifth-floor hotel balcony in Berlin before thousands of screaming fans and flashing lenses, chose to simply evaporate from the public eye. He became a ghost in a hyper-connected world. But in early 2025, the silence didn't just break, it shattered. With no Hollywood PR machinery, no curated family scripts, and no warnings, Bigi Jackson sat down for an interview that ripped up the rulebook. What he offered was not a hollow tribute to a pop deity. It was a raw, quietly devastating confession about a father who had emotionally abandoned him long before his heart ever stopped beating. Which brings us to the haunting question at the center of this file. What dark reality finally forced the most tight-lipped child in the world to expose the fractures of his multi-million-dollar dynasty? And who was Michael Jackson really when the cameras were off and the stage lights died? The untold truth from behind the gates of Neverland starts right now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and brace yourself, because the answers are coming up in the next few seconds. Chapter 1. The Psychological Trap of Neverland. To the rest of the world, Neverland Ranch was an impossible, glittering dream. It was a 2,700-acre oasis where the roller coasters never stopped, fairy tale melodies drifted through the California oaks, and amusement park popcorn was always fresh. But for Prince Michael Jackson II, the child the world would relentlessly mock as Blanket, Neverland wasn't paradise. It was a gilded cage, a place where profound, suffocating isolation was wrapped in 24-karat gold and lined with the most expensive velvet money could buy. To truly comprehend the deep, quiet ache inside Bigi Jackson, you have to go back to the very beginning, to his birth on February 21st, 2002, at Sharp Grossmont Hospital in La Mesa, California. He was not welcomed into the world by a mother's warmth. Bigi was born via a completely anonymous surrogate. The identity of the woman who carried him remains locked away in sterile legal vaults, a permanent blank space in his life. From the moment he first opened his eyes, Bigi's world was halved. He had no concept of a mother, no maternal scent to cling to when he woke up crying in the middle of the night. The only anchor he had, the only person who defined the word family, was Michael Jackson. But by a cruel twist of fate, that anchor was also the epicenter of the global media universe. Michael Jackson wasn't just a father. He was a corporate empire, a besieged king trapped under a mountain of multi-million-dollar lawsuits, exhausting rehearsal schedules, and a sprawling entourage of handlers. From his infancy, Bigi had to learn to share his only parent with billions of screaming strangers. He grew up believing that an absent father was the natural state of existence. Imagine a 4-year-old child wandering completely alone through a massive, silent amusement park. Around him are exotic animals shipped from across the globe, a 200-seat movie theater waiting to play any cartoon he desires, and giant Ferris wheels painted in brilliant, blinding colors. But everything is dead quiet. There are no kids his age, no laughter, no shouting. There is only the wind whistling through the steel tracks of the roller coasters and the small, hollow echo of his own footsteps on the pavement. In his explosive 2025 revelation, Bigi stripped away the fairy tale facade of Neverland, exposing a devastating truth. The ranch was entirely empty of human presence. It was a psychological prison camp disguised as a toy store. The most haunting, heartbreaking detail of Bigi's early childhood was how he actually saw his father. For normal children, a father is someone who sits across from you at the dinner table, someone who holds your hand while crossing the street. But for Bigi, His most vivid memories of Michael Jackson were defined by the pitch-black tint of a bulletproof limousine window. There were consecutive weeks where the only interaction between father and son was a passing glimpse. The toddler would stand alone, pressing his face against the heavy silk curtains of the main house, looking down at the massive driveway. He would watch the door of the limousine swing open, see a frail figure in a black fedora rush inside, completely shielded by a wall of towering bodyguards, and watch the car speed away, leaving nothing but exhaust and silence. Other times, it was just a frantic shadow cutting through the endless corridors of the mansion past midnight. Michael would glide by, his cape brushing the walls, hurrying into a locked boardroom or a private recording studio before assistants slammed the door shut. A 7-year-old boy was left standing in the dark, watching his father's silhouette fade into the woodwork. Michael's existence inside his own home was like that of a ghost. Everyone knew he was there, but no one could actually touch him. This agonizing distance gave birth to a cold, clinical reality that Bigi had to endure every single day: outsourced love. At Neverland, the most primal emotional needs of a child were commercialized and managed like a corporate shift rotation. When night fell over the valley and the terrifying darkness swallowed the vast ranch, 5-year-old Blanket would face the night terrors alone. He needed a comforting voice, a bedtime story told by his father to soothe him to sleep. But the person who unlocked his bedroom door was never Michael Jackson. It was a hired nanny in a crisp uniform, reading pages from a book in a practiced, detached cadence. When he was hungry, 5-star chefs prepared his meals, served by silent maids who bowed and withdrew. When he fell and scraped his knee, when he wept bitter tears of childhood loneliness, the arms that rushed to pick him up did not belong to his dad. They belonged to security guards with earpieces and loaded weapons, working a strict 8-hour shift. When the shift ended, that face disappeared, and a new stranger took their place based on a corporate schedule. Bigi grew up in the arms of people who were paid to care. He learned very early that affection had a dollar value. The bitterest truth Bigi Jackson revealed was Michael's sheer, tragic helplessness as a parent. Michael loved his children fiercely. No one denies that. He tried to compensate for his absence with staggering, desperate grand gestures. He bought Bigi one-of-a-kind, hand-carved toys from Europe. He threw birthday parties that made world headlines. He turned the boy's bedroom into a warehouse of priceless gifts. But Michael, whose own childhood was brutally beaten out of him by Joe Jackson, was emotionally crippled. He was entirely incapable of giving his son the raw, uncomplicated connection a child actually needs. Michael didn't know how to just sit on the floor and build Lego blocks without worrying about the vultures outside the gates. He couldn't provide a normal family dinner uninterrupted by lawyers or frantic phone calls. Michael built a fortress to protect Blanket from a toxic world, but he failed to see that the fortress was starving his youngest son of affection. He gave him the entire world, but he could never give him himself. Bigi lived his first 7 years as a lonely little prince in a hollow palace, forced to love a mythical legend instead of a flesh-and-blood father. And before the boy could ever find a way to cross that massive emotional gulf and truly hug his dad, destiny struck a lethal blow on June 25, 2009. The temporary absence of Michael Jackson became a permanent, echoing silence. Chapter 2: The Night Destiny Broke and the Unanswered Questions. On June 25, 2009, the illusion of safety shattered forever inside the rented mansion on Carrollwood Drive in Holmby Hills. For 7-year-old Bigi, Michael Jackson was a distant son, hard to reach, but the absolute center of his universe. Suddenly, that sun went cold. He watched through the banister as paramedics pumped his father's lifeless chest, the chaotic shouting echoing through the halls. In a single night, the man who was an untouchable myth to the world, but simply daddy to a lonely boy, vanished into thin air. Days later, on July 7, 2009, the world gathered at the Staples Center for a televised memorial watched by over 1 billion people. The air inside the arena was thick with heavy grief, blinding stage lights, and the overwhelming scent of thousands of floral tributes. Then came the moment that engraved itself into pop culture history. 11-year-old Paris Jackson stepped up to the microphone. Her voice shook, cutting through the cavernous arena.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
But when the broadcast cameras panned down to the youngest son, the world saw a jarring contrast. Blanket stood completely paralyzed, clad in a small, oversized black suit, his long dark hair falling over his face. He did not shed a single tear. He didn't sob. He didn't hide his face. His knuckles were white, his tiny hand fiercely gripping the edge of his older brother Prince's suit jacket as if clinging to a life raft. In his other hand, he clutched a blue plastic Star Wars action figure, a heartbreaking remnant of a normal childhood that was officially over. To the ruthless tabloids the next morning, his blank stare was labeled as cold, unfeeling, or detached. But Bigi's 2025 confession exposed the raw psychological trauma behind that mask. It was a textbook case of emotional freezing. "I wasn't empty," Bigi recalled. "I was suffocating." He wasn't just mourning a parent. His mind was desperately trying to process the abrupt, absolute deletion of his protector. The tragedy wasn't just that Michael was gone. It was the realization that the unresolved distance between them was now frozen in time. The questions Bigi was waiting to ask when he grew older, the hugs he hoped to receive when the chaotic tour schedules ended, all of it was buried in a gold-plated casket. Before he could ever truly know his father, Michael Jackson had been pinned like a butterfly under the glass display of history. The emotional whiplash grew worse in the weeks that followed. Bigi was abruptly uprooted from the lawless, whimsical kingdom of Neverland and dropped into his grandmother Catherine's estate in Havenhurst, Encino. The transition was brutal. The endless days of roaming empty amusement parks were replaced by a strict, old-school Jehovah's Witness household. Suddenly, there were mandatory family dinners, rigid bedtimes, and structured schooling. Worse than the rules were the eyes. Every time he walked down the hallway, his aunts, uncles, and cousins would stare at him, silently scanning his features, desperately looking for a ghost. He was no longer a little boy. He was a living museum of Michael's tragedy. Chapter 3: I Am Nobody's Blanket. The gold-plated cage didn't disappear when Michael Jackson died. It simply shrunk, morphing into a heavy, suffocating skin that a 13-year-old boy was forced to wear every single day. To survive the crushing weight of a ghost's legacy, you either have to burn down the monument or recreate yourself from the ashes. In 2015, the youngest son of the King of Pop chose to do both. For over a decade, the world refused to call him by his actual name, Prince Michael Jackson II. To the predatory tabloids, the internet trolls, and the late-night talk show hosts, he was simply Blanket. Michael had coined the nickname with deeply sentimental intentions, once explaining to fans with wide, earnest eyes that a blanket was a symbol of ultimate blessing, a way of enveloping someone in pure love and spiritual protection. But Hollywood doesn't deal in sentiment. It deals in blood. The media weaponized the name, twisting it into a permanent cultural punchline. It became a toxic, inescapable meme, inextricably linked to those horrifying, breathless seconds on November 19, 2002, at the Adlon Hotel in Berlin, Germany. Whenever the world heard the word blanket, they didn't think of love. They pictured a terrifying image, a 9-month-old infant, his face hidden beneath a white cloth, suspended over a concrete balcony railing 5 stories above a screaming mob, dangling from the hands of a manic pop star. By the time he reached early adolescence, that nickname wasn't a shield anymore. It was a target painted directly on his chest. Let's pull back the curtain on a specific morning in September 2015, inside a sunlit classroom at the Buckley School, an elite, hyper-private academy nestled in the hills of Sherman Oaks. This was supposed to be a safe haven, a sanctuary where celebrity children could buy back a fraction of normalcy. But cruelty is a universal currency, even in high-priced private schools. Imagine a 13-year-old boy sitting in the middle row, desperately trying to shrink his posture, hiding behind a curtain of long, pin-straight black hair that fell past his shoulders. His shoulders are hunched, his eyes fixed firmly on the wood grain of his desk. The new homeroom teacher, unfamiliar with the unwritten social codes of the campus, opens the heavy attendance binder. She runs her finger down the list of names. She pauses. The classroom goes dead quiet. The air grows thick, pregnant with the collective, cruel anticipation of 30 teenagers. "Blanket?" the teacher asks, her voice echoing off the whiteboards. A suffocating wave of hushed giggles breaks out in the back row. Someone whispers a cruel joke about hotel balconies. Another student mimes dropping an object onto the floor. The boy in the middle row doesn't move. He doesn't look up. His face flushes a deep, burning crimson. In that agonizingly long silence, he wasn't a human being. He was a freak show attraction. He was a living piece of tabloid wreckage. Every single day, that roll call felt like a public execution of his dignity. He was treated like an alien biological specimen dropped into a normal world, viewed not for who he was, but through the warped lens of his father's eccentricities. He realized right then that if he didn't kill Blanket, the name would eventually destroy him. Later that year, without a single press release, without consulting the sprawling Jackson family PR machine, and without warning his publicists, the 13-year-old boy staged a quiet, ruthless psychological coup. He went to his guardians and school administrators with a calm, unyielding ultimatum. "Never call me Blanket again. My name is Bigi." This wasn't just a cosmetic change or a moody teenage phase. It was an act of cold-blooded survival. It was a conscious decision to assassinate the weak, pathetic, victimized identity of Blanket that the media had manufactured for him. By legally and socially demanding to be called Bigi, a German name meaning idealistic or unique, he was seizing the scalpel and cutting his own umbilical cord from the media's narrative. He was burying the boy from the balcony. With the birth of Bigi came an era of extreme, almost militant invisibility. While his sister Paris began walking haute couture runways in Paris and his brother Prince accepted broadcasting gigs on Entertainment Tonight, Bigi pulled the shutters closed on his life. He flatly refused every single red carpet invitation. He banned family members from posting his photograph on public social media accounts. He demanded that school yearbooks keep his images minimal. He became a ghost by choice, engineering a lifestyle of profound, calculated obscurity. Where does a boy hide when he is running away from the most famous name on earth? For Bigi, the sanctuary wasn't a place. It was a medium. He retreated entirely into the dark, flickering world of cinema. His older brother, Prince, would later reveal a startling glimpse into Bigi's obsessive, hyper-focused mind during this period. Bigi didn't just watch movies. He dissected them with a cold, academic precision. By age 15, he possessed an encyclopedic, almost eerie knowledge of Hollywood history. He could listen to the obscure title of a black and white film from the 1940s and instantly recite its exact release year, the name of the director of photography, and the studio that financed it, even if he had never actually seen a single frame of the movie itself. But there was a deeply heartbreaking, hidden motive behind this cinematic obsession. Bigi wasn't studying film to become Hollywood's next nepotism star. He had absolutely zero desire to stand in front of a camera. He studied film because it was the only language his father had left behind that wasn't corrupted by scandal. Before his tragic death in 2009, Michael Jackson had hired a private cinematic tutor to teach his children the mechanics of screenwriting, framing, and visual storytelling. To Michael, film was the ultimate magic. Therefore, to Bigi, a film set was the only place where he could feel his father's heartbeat without the noise of the tabloids. Every time Bigi analyzed a camera angle, every time he spent hours reading an old screenplay in his quiet bedroom, he wasn't just pursuing a hobby. He was having a private, uninterrupted conversation with the ghost of Michael Jackson. The cinematic universe was the one sanctuary where his father hadn't abandoned him, the one space where the king of pop wasn't a headline or a defendant, but a teacher. Through the lens of a camera, the lonely little prince finally found a way to touch the father he never got to hold in real life. Chapter 4: The 2025 Shot, an indictment of a father's legacy. Blood may be thicker than water, but in the Jackson dynasty, it is entirely dictated by the fluctuating value of a catalog. For a man who spent his entire life running from the vultures of fame, the ultimate tragedy of Michael Jackson is that his death only made the vultures hungrier. And in March 2024, the youngest, most fiercely protective son was forced to pull the trigger on his own family to save what was left of his father's soul. The catalyst was a staggering historic deal, a proposed $600 million sale of half of Michael Jackson's legendary music publishing and master recording catalog to Sony Music. To the corporate executors of the estate and the financial analysts on Wall Street, this was a masterstroke of asset liquidation. But to Bigi Jackson, this catalog wasn't a portfolio. It was a holy relic. It was the only physical, breathing manifestation of the father he never got to know. Those master tapes contained the actual vibrations of his father's vocal cords, the sweat of his late-night studio sessions, and the stories he used to tell. It was the last thread tying Bigi to the man behind the myth. Initially, Bigi stood shoulder to shoulder in absolute solidarity with his 93-year-old grandmother, Katherine Jackson. Together, they formed a united front, filing systemic objections against the estate's executors to block the massive sale. They argued bitterly that selling off such a monumental chunk of Michael's artistic output was a direct violation of his lifelong wishes. Michael had always told his children never to sell his music, famously calling his catalog his other children. But then the legal hammer fell. A Los Angeles judge dismissed their objections, ruling that the $600 million deal with Sony was entirely valid and could proceed. This was the exact moment the battle line shifted, exposing the toxic, rotting core of the Jackson family dynamics. Katherine Jackson, driven by an old-school, uncompromising stubbornness and backed by a predatory circle of extended family advisors, demanded an immediate, costly appeal. She wanted to burn millions of dollars from the estate's funds to keep fighting a war that was already mathematically lost. That was when Bigi looked into the abyss and drew a hard, bloody line in the sand. In a shocking, aggressive legal counteraction that caught the entertainment world completely off guard, Bigi filed a petition to the court demanding that the estate deny Katherine Jackson's request for legal fees. The headlines were savage. The tabloids immediately painted Bigi as a cold, ungrateful grandson suing his elderly grandmother, abandoning his own flesh and blood for a corporate payout. But if you strip away the sensationalist headlines and analyze the psychological reality, Bigi's move wasn't an act of betrayal. It was an act of profound, sacrificial love. Bigi looked at the aunts, uncles, and distant cousins, whispering in his grandmother's ear, and he saw them for exactly what they were: parasites. He realized that the extended family didn't care about preserving Michael's art. They were using an elderly, fading matriarch as a human shield to drag out a pointless legal war, all so they could siphon millions of dollars in continuous legal fees from Michael's estate. Biggie looked at the $600 million catalog and came to a devastating, mature realization. If saving his father's music meant turning his father's name into a permanent laughingstock courtroom circus for another decade, he would rather let the music go. He would rather lose the masters to Sony than watch his own family turn his father's ghost into a cash printing machine to Jose tear each other apart over. He chose to let the corporate deal close, effectively suffocating the family's ability to milk the estate for dry cash. It wasn't greed, it was a mercy killing of the drama. Chapter 5. The 2025. Confession ripping off the Velveteen veil. For a year, Biggie endured the public shaming of that lawsuit in total, agonizing silence. But in early 2025, during a raw, stripped-down interview that felt less like a PR appearance and more like a psychological exorcism, the 23-year-old man finally spoke the unvarnished truth. The interviewer, smelling blood, didn't hold back, leaning forward to deliver a question designed to sting. Some people in your family say you weren't as close to your father as Paris and Prince were. They say you abandoned the fight for his music because you didn't care enough. What do you say to that? Biggie didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He simply adjusted his posture, his dark eyes locking onto the camera lens with a piercing, ancient calm. "I've stayed quiet for 15 years out of respect," Biggie said, his voice dropping into a quiet, gravelly whisper. "But I can't hide behind that respect anymore. People like to paint this beautiful, flawless picture of my childhood. They want to believe that Neverland was a perfect fairy tale and that my father was this omnipresent, magical protector." He paused, taking a slow, heavy breath that seemed to carry the weight of his entire youth. The truth is, he wasn't there. There were weeks, months, where he just wasn't there in the way a kid actually needs a father. He was drowning in his own struggles, his own paranoia, his own career. When you're a little kid, you don't care about a private amusement park or a multi-million-dollar catalog. You just want your dad to sit with you at dinner. You want him to look you in the eyes and tell you you're safe. I didn't get that. I got a grand gesture instead of a presence. The room went dead silent. It was a staggering, historic indictment. Biggie wasn't just defending his legal choices. He was exposing the foundational trauma of his life. The worst part, Biggie continued, his voice trembling slightly but remaining precise, is the permanent finality of it. He died when I was 7. I was just a baby. The chance to fix that distance, the chance to finally grow up and ask him why he was so far away, that was completely stolen from me. So when I see my family turning his memory into a permanent legal battleground for money, it makes me sick. My father was a human being who was broken by this industry. Letting the lawsuit go wasn't me abandoning him. It was me finally letting him rest. It is impossible to watch that 2025 interview and not feel an overwhelming urge to defend Bigi Jackson. In a family that has spent 50 years performing for the cameras, monetizing their trauma, and weaponizing their tears, Biggie emerged as the only adult in the room. His confession wasn't an act of malice or a bitter take-top of Michael Jackson's memory. It was the ultimate form of maturity. By refusing to idolize his father as a perfect, flawless God, Biggie did something no one else in the world had ever managed to do. He humanized Michael Jackson. He acknowledged the neglect. He validated his own childhood loneliness, and yet, in the very same breath, he chose to forgive. Biggie concluded the interview with a statement that serves as the definitive judgment on the Jackson legacy. He gave us a magical world because his own childhood was a nightmare. He loved us the best way he knew how, even if his best was broken. I love him. I will always protect his name. But I am protecting the man, not the brand. With those words, the 23-year-old completely dismantled the corporate machinery of Hollywood. He proved that the most silent child was, in fact, the strongest. He didn't need the $600 million catalog to remember his father, because he had already done the hardest work imaginable. He had looked at the wreckage of his childhood, accepted his father's deep flaws, and chose to carry the legacy forward on his own, quiet terms. Michael Jackson may have been the king of the world, an immortal deity to billions, but to Biggie, he remains a lifelong riddle without a final answer. This dramatic shattering of his 15-year silence was never an act of betrayal. It was the delayed, suffocating cry of a 7-year-old boy who finally found the courage to stand up and tell the world the unvarnished truth. My father was a legend, yes, but he was also just a deeply damaged, fragile human being. And now, the ghost of Blanket is officially dead. The vulnerable boy on the balcony has been laid to rest. In his place stands Bigi Jackson, the only person truly protecting his father's honor, not by chasing headlines, but by having the immense bravery to live a completely ordinary life. What are your thoughts on this agonizingly dark reality behind the youngest Jackson child? Do you believe his extreme 15-year silence was the only right choice he had to save his own sanity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the vault of musical legends. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the very next video.